Hello, this is my video log for ownership and funding. Throughout the last 10 years, film and television and how we access it has changed dramatically. This has mainly been as a result of advances in technology and product delivery, such as the use of the internet and third-party social media sites, for example YouTube. We as consumers have never had more choice or better quality programmes and more ways of accessing them. No longer do we have to congregate around one flickering box. Gone are the days where we only had 4 channels to choose from in the UK. Today, anyone with a smartphone can access the full range of programming from around the globe. Competition within the media industry has never been fiercer. Both TV and film are structured in a way that allows different types of companies to access different types of funding. Ownership and funding are two interlinked aspects that facilitate the procurement, development and distribution of information whilst maintaining a solid profit base. The importance of ownership and funding for the film and television industries and their contribution both to both global and local economies has been acknowledged by the House of Lords report in 2010. And it's also been evidenced by the 2007 tax relief on film production expenditure that the government put in place. So what is ownership? Ownership refers to the person or group that has financial and creative control of a company or companies within the media industry, whether that be film, TV or other media outlets such as the internet or print. These owners can be made up of conglomerates, independent or private companies and their subsidiaries. Many of the media conglomerates worldwide own a variety of subsidiary media organisations. They often have multiple interests, but all of the subsidiaries are focused upon an end goal. For example, Disney, they have several TV studios including the child-focused Disney Channel and the more adult documentary Discovery Channel. So their focus is broad and they're able to engage with different strata of the consumer base. There are many other conglomerates such as Viacom, Sony and Universal, to name a few, and they all work slightly differently but in a similar way. As previously stated, subsidiaries are smaller companies which are owned at least in part by larger media conglomerates. The Rupert Murdoch-owned News Corp has several well-known subsidiaries, The Sun and 20th Century Fox being 2, and as a result, they have an opportunity to exert influence over a vast network of media sources. Some subsidiaries are not clearly linked and may not be as well known as being part of a bigger media machine. Many people, and I wasn't until I did this, are not aware that Channel 5 is part of ITV. I had absolutely no clue. There are some companies that work without the umbrella of a bigger organisation, and these are referred to as independent companies. They're often small and self-owned, and whilst they don't have the benefit or the protection of being part of a larger media structure, they get to keep all of their profit. It can be difficult to survive as a small company outsourcing parts of development or distribution process to other companies, whereas bigger organisations can complete media projects in-house from conception to distribution, which means lower overheads and larger profit margins, and that's actually part of vertical integration, which I'll talk about later. Bankruptcy is often a very real possibility for independent companies, especially in today's global market. The biggest source of competition for the UK is still the American market. It can be commonplace for many independent companies to be bought by large organisations, thereby solidifying the conglomerate share of the market. For example, Disney bought Pixar, which had actually been a spin-off of Lucasfilms, and was funded by Apple. That's quite complicated, but they bought it in 2006 for $7.4 billion. This enabled them to continue to consolidate their position in being a strong contender in the animated film market. Obviously, their big rival is DreamWorks, who did used to work with Disney, but wasn't part of Disney. Private companies are similar to independent companies. They can also be owned by an individual or a group, but the main difference is that they can choose their shareholders. Like independent companies, their profit belongs to them or their shareholders, and they don't have to meet the strict exchange commission requirements that public companies do. Despite the increased number of channels available, public service broadcasters still produce the most UK originated content. There are two types of public service broadcasters. One of them is the BBC, which is funded by a state licence fee, and there are commercial public service broadcasters, such as ITV, who raise funds through advertising. Public service broadcasters are also comprised of public and commercial radio stations, respectively. The commercial public service broadcasters are facing considerable financial pressure due to falling advertising revenues, partly as a result of the increasing competition from online. This impacts on programme budgets, and as a consequence, certain genres of television, for example children's, are under threat. Whilst the BBC is funded by the licence payer and it can be argued it's government owned, in today's financial and competitive climate it is also under pressure, even though it's getting the licence fee money. In 2010, in the House of Lords report, they recommended selling off part of the successful World Service, and more recently, Conservative Chairman Grant Shapps has said that the BBC should not get the full licence fee due to the scandals and complaints that they've been having, and that also, apparently, government concerns that the news isn't biased on the BBC. So that's just the argument at the moment, but there's been some calls for the licence fee to actually be shared and also given to the commercial PSBs such as ITV, because obviously they're struggling financially as well. So how is TV and film funded? So the ways that the media companies gain funding are as varied as the different types of companies that are themselves. So non-commercial PSBs are funded through the licence payer, so that's the BBC, and in essence you can say the licence fee is a tax. The annual cost of a colour TV licence is £145.50, and black and white TV licence is £49, and that was of April 2010, which it's being frozen until 2016, when the government will review the BBC's strategic objectives that were set in 2009. So that's a big difference between BBC and ITV. The BBC do have to, even though ITV is a PSB as well, the BBC do have to really answer to the government. Commercial PSBs, so ITV, etc., is funded by raising revenue from advertising and sponsorship. One example, and this is a sponsorship example, is Talk Talk, who sponsor the X Factor. The more popular the programme, the more revenue raised, because the PSB will be able to charge more. And this is what's leading to less popular genres being threatened, because there is not the same amount of money. If you're not going to get a big audience, then what's the point in advertising? Subscriptions such as Sky and Virgin currently exceed advertising revenue. Those that subscribe tend to pay on a monthly basis. I think you can get weekly, but it's mainly monthly, to satellite and cable companies. There are also options of extra premium channels which generate some extra income. And pay-per-view is often really closely linked with subscription services and is normally used for things like sporting or music events. Sky has several pay-per-view film channels and often shows, I put EWE, but WWE wrestling events via pay-per-view. Often the cost of paying for one sporting event, which I think is around £5, negates the cost of a more expensive subscription channel. So instead of having to buy a whole sports channel, you can just pay for the one thing you want to watch. Advertising is where branded products are promoted during and in between programmes. The revenue generated is then used to subsequently fund programming. The more popular the programme, the more revenue it can generate. It's kind of different from sponsorship that we see on TV. The sponsorship, there's a contract there. But with advertising, the contract is not quite as sealed. But you still ask for your advert to be played during certain programmes to get your target audience. The more popular programme, as I said before, the more revenue it can generate. Advertising companies will often target large conglomerates to specific, so that they can specifically target certain sectors of the population to increase the chance of sales. Within the UK, there's quite strict laws in place to prevent abuse of this system. In particular, certain types of adverts can't be shown during children's programmes. Things like, I think it's junk food. That can't be shown during children's programmes. There's quite a few, and most of them are around children's programmes actually. How much each campaign will cost a company depends vastly on the channel, time of day and target audience. Sponsorship, which I've briefly already mentioned, is where companies pay to have their logo or brand put before and after a commercial break. It's not always down to physical products, and it can also mean that other channels show sponsorship messages for their competitors. At the moment, Sky has some form of sponsorship on ITV, where they're advertising a lot of, mainly Sky Broadband, but Sky products on ITV. They're also advertising the Atlantic channel as well, and Sky does have the monopoly on the Atlantic channel till next year, but then it will be available for other subscription-based services. Also, the guy from Virgin told me. Product placements are more widely used in film and TV. Companies will pay production companies to include their product prominently. There are rules as to how long a product can be visible on screen, allegedly, although they're not always adhered to. Some product placement can be quite laughably gratuitous. I watched World War Z, and there's one scene where Brad Pitt's just discovered the cure, and he's surrounded by zombies, but he stops to stand by a Pepsi machine, which has hundreds of Pepsis all facing out. He gets a Pepsi, he breaks the tab, he drinks it. That's like 6 to 10 seconds, maybe even more. But yeah, that was quite funny. Vertical and horizontal integration. So, vertical integration is usually only seen within conglomerates. It is where one corporation owns the company that made the film, the company that distributes the film, and the cinema in which the film is shown. It's basically a company that has access at every single point of the process from start to finish. It's cost effective. It helps maintain the massive profit margins that they tend to require. They basically own companies, as I said, in different points of the same production path. However, if the film is a complete flop, they can also make massive losses. So it's relatively low risk still, because even if the film's a bit of a flop, they'll usually make money somewhere. Disney, I'm always going on about Disney. They're one such company that illustrates vertical integration really well. They use Disney-owned companies and therefore profit from every step of the movie-making process. So think High School Musical. They made it, produced it, distributed it, marketed it, and produced merchandise they could then sell in its stores. They also helped to promote it on their TV channels, and they have a radio station as well. Horizontal integration is where a company expands its business by buying into different products that are similar to current lines. For example, this is phone, but AT&T acquired T-Mobile. They've also acquired one called Bell Mobile, I think, in America. This allows them to build more of a monopoly in their area. So both News Corp and the BBC have aspects of both types of integration. The BBC, they have some vertical, some horizontal integration because they produce content, they show content, they sell content, they distribute content abroad, but they also have things like BBC iPlayer, which shows it on the internet. So yeah. And News Corp just own like the whole world. News Corp owns printing presses, different types of media products. They're in the internet, although they bought the really dodgy MySpace for like 7 billion, whatever it was, in 2005. So yeah. Job roles. Okay, that's my second video log. So that's the end of my first video log. Very rushed, but thank you.